I'm Scott Allen Miller. It is the 11th of October, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua. Today we're going to be answering a viewer question about being pregnant and potentially giving birth while traveling in Nicaragua. We're going to be tackling some things around safety and healthcare, those sort of things, and other things we may need to consider. It's a long question, so we're going to start off by reading that. And we're going to get right to it on our daily update. I'll see you right after the bump. Welcome to the show today. I'm going to read our email for the day here on October the 11th, and this is a long one, so let's get right to it. Great video. Thanks so much. I have been listening often lately, and we are getting ready to make our way there in just a few weeks, there being of Nicaragua, of course. I have a unique question that relates to this topic. We recently found out we're expecting our third child. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. We have been months planning our trip to Nicaragua, and after consulting our midwife here, I assume the United States, possibly Canada, and thinking about all kinds of factors, we have decided to still come to Nicaragua. We are coming with the intention of considering relocation, so exploring the country from that lens, and possibly other Central American countries or Mexico, but I feel a real strong pull to Nicaragua, so we are following that first. From what I understand, if a child is born in Nicaragua to expat parents, the child will have birthright citizenship. Is this correct? Would that potentially help our family to obtain residency in a more streamlined way should we decide to want to do that in the future? On a whole other topic, not really related to this video, but prevalent to my reality now, are there any inherent risk factors of traveling at a slow pace in Nicaragua while pregnant, besides the obvious washing vegetables, fruits well, caution with water, and so forth? And how is the healthcare system there in general? Are home births an option within their healthcare system? Would there be any extra benefit to obtaining healthcare insurance for myself now? We hadn't planned to do it, just set aside a fund for that in case we should need it. Thanks so much for considering these inquiries. All right, that is a lot to tackle, so let's get right to it. First off, I want to point out today that it is really overcast and yet exceptionally bright out, so it feels like it's dark, but you're like squinting and really struggling. I can't see anything on the camera today. It is so bright out, like the screens are completely blown out from how bright it is, even though this video is going to look dark, I guarantee, just because of the incredibly low contrast going on. All right, so the first part of that question is, do you get birthright citizenship by being born in Nicaragua? I believe that is true, but I am in no way an authority on that. I'm going to attempt to ask that question and try to have that answered by the end of the video, but at this moment, my answer to that is I solidly don't know, but I suspect that you are correct. That is the standard in most of the countries in this part of the world and is just a general standard. Normally, you are allowed to return to the place of your birth, the United States being a strong exception to that, and not always an exception. All right, future Scott here, and I'm actually jumping in with a little bit of information that I looked up here. So did some quick research, and this is not official, but it should be pretty official. I was wrong that, we'll get to it about citizenship, but birthright, anyone born in Nicaragua, regardless of where your parents are from, you get citizenship in Nicaragua, or at least the option of citizenship in Nicaragua. This is similar to Japan, where you have the right to citizenship, but at age 18 you have to make a decision. And that's what's going on here. If you are born in Nicaragua, when you reach the age of majority, or 18, you have to choose what your nationality is going to be. In most cases, I believe, I don't see this stated, but I believe the case is that if you choose Nicaraguan citizenship, you have to give up another citizenship, unless it is a dual citizenship with, and they say this for other things, the CA4 countries or Spain. Those are special cases because the CA4, they're part of the federation that is no longer official, but the border zone is still, they still recognize each other as a shared heritage. And then because Spain was the colonizing motherland, there are still a lot of treaties and a lot of special cases with Spain. So be aware of those things. So if you have kids born here, they're going to get citizenship at least as an offering. However, I think they would have to give up. I think it's American that you have. And as much as all of us want to live in Nicaragua and not in the United States, I would be very, very wary of choosing Nicaraguan citizenship over American citizenship in a either or scenario. The power of the American passport is a very big deal. And the weakness of the Nicaraguan passport combined with the incredible amount of pressure put on by the United States to cripple the use of the Nicaraguan passport. So no one is going to tell you more how great I think it is living in and moving in and being a resident of Nicaragua and investing in and helping the country and making this your home. Absolutely, 100% for sure, recommend it. But getting citizenship here, you need to be very careful. That is a massive step. It is not like getting citizenship in Panama, where it's like, ooh, extra cool. I have a backup plan. I have a more powerful passport. I can do all those things. No, this is nothing like that. And so it is a massive decision. And 99% of people being presented with the option of getting that citizenship would decline. So be aware. This is not something that going out of the way to get for your children is very likely to do them any good. They will almost certainly feel the need to decline it upon becoming the age of majority. However, there are some points about naturalization that were brought up. You have the right to pursue residency citizenship if you've lived in the country for 4 years. That does not mean that you can get it by living here for 4 years. It's just a requirement that you need to have been resident for 4 years before you try to get it. No one should be really looking for it, so this really shouldn't come up as a thing, but people ask me all the time. So there are some details. And some people say, oh, you got to start your residency to get towards it. On this technicality, kind of, right? If you're truly meaning to pursue it, which really shouldn't happen, and they're truly going to give it to you, which is basically never going to happen, this is the process. You do have to get 4 years of residency in, and so if for some reason you really did need to do that, speeding that up could be done by getting residency earlier. But you're already resident. I don't know what the big deal is. Foreigners who've had legal residence for 2 years, but are originally from Spain or one of the CA4, potentially some other countries, but specifically those, or have Nicaraguan children, can get citizenship in 2 years. So you would be, if you had kids here and you're already residents, which was not your question. Your question was easing residency. It's not going to do that. It would, if you were to want to revoke your American citizenship and get Nicaraguan citizenship, you could potentially use your children as a way, plus your residency, as a way to ease that process. Trust me, you don't want to do that for them or for you. So just let it go. And then that is roughly it. Those are the extra points. It is worth noting, because some people have also said, one of the reasons I want citizenship is it can't be revoked. No, they very clearly have a list of laws about how they revoke it. So some of the ways you can revoke your Nicaraguanness, if you went through all this process, which I'm telling you not to, but if you went and did this and you got citizenship, got citizenship, even I get confused on these words, you can simply exit the country and use a passport from somewhere else, anywhere else. Instantly, you are no longer a national of Nicaragua. You have lost your citizenship. That is how easy it is. Or if you were to enter Nicaragua and present the passport of another country, you would be no longer a Nicaraguan. That's pretty dramatic, that's all it takes to lose your citizenship. If you have used false documents during the process of becoming a citizen, I think that goes without saying, that if the process was invalid, that the results are invalid, but not always is that the case, but it is here. And very importantly, if you are treasonous, you can lose your citizenship. And this is the one that a lot of people complain about, because there is a very strong push from foreign powers for people who live here to commit treason, or something very similar to treason at least. And this law is from time to time used to kick people out of the country and return them to their country of origin, based on that being the better option than going to jail or something worse for treason, right? So be aware that obviously if you're committing treason, you should know that you're doing something really terrible. But if you are simply mistakenly using a different transport document or whatever, you could accidentally lose your citizenship for a really silly reason. And there's a thought, right, that like no matter what you do, you can never lose citizenship. And that's a very American thing, because in the United States, they never want you to lose citizenship, because they're going to take your taxes for forever no matter where you live, and they're happy to incarcerate you for forever or punish you in whatever way the United States want to. They don't worry about sending you off somewhere to let someone else punish you. They don't worry about sending you out to be someone else's problem. They will make you an American problem, and they can do that because of resources and the size of the country and things like that. Here, the result is much more likely to be, nope, we're going to send you back to where you came from, your punishment, which is far worse, right? So in the United States, what is the fear? Going to prison or worse. in Nicaragua, what's the fear? Being sent to America, right? That's the real threat. Putting you in jail, putting you in prison, obviously undesirable, but if that's for like you stole some bread from the store, you need to go to jail. If you do something really terrible, they literally deport you to the United States. That is how strongly they consider that a punishment, that you now have to live in the United States and deal with being there. Like, that's a real thing. That has happened a bunch in recent history. And the United States has referred to, they never say the whole thing, they refer to people being banished to the United States as inhumane treatment, just to be clear. All right, back to Pascott. The second part, will that streamline the process for becoming a resident? Absolutely not. It is not going to make the easiest thing ever any easier. It's going to remain really, really easy to become a resident, but it's not going to make it any easier. The process to becoming a resident here, this is worth noting for everyone who's considering this, because it seems to be a point of major concern, is basically as easy as it can possibly be. And I realize that people who've gone through it are going to say, it could be a bit easier, and I understand why we feel that way, and I'm in the same boat. Like, boy, they could have made this easier, couldn't they? But within reason, for a country that doesn't have the best computer systems, that does not have the most up-to-date of everything, that still needs to do a lot of checks and balances to be able to make you safely be able to be a resident, Nicaragua handles it pretty well, and the residency process is generally quite easy. It may be lengthy, it may take some time, but it's not something you have to worry about. As long as you are coming from a country where you are visa-free travel, so the US, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, a lot of those places, and you're coming to Nicaragua, you just become a tourist when you get here, and you can stay indefinitely. So that part, you don't have this like you can't stay until you have residency thing. You can basically stay immediately. Then the process of getting residency starts when they tell you it needs to start. So you don't need to worry about it until they tell you. You may want to plan a little bit, be prepared for when they do tell you, sure, but you don't have to kick anything off. We do often recommend getting some of your paperwork from your home country, especially if you hope to not have to return. For us, that could be birth certificates, things in apostille, police records, those kinds of things. Those can be easier to get before you move, of course. So getting some paperwork from your home country is never a problem, but often you can only get that within so much time before you start the process. So it's not always valuable to do that, but might be valuable to get the process started. Once the government tells you you need to become a resident, then you file to begin that process. You do want to have a lawyer picked out ahead of time, just so you have those contacts and you're not scrambling at the last second. That would be wise, of course, and they'll just be prepared. Yeah, we're doing everything so that we're ready whenever that time comes, 6 months, 6 years, whatever. Typically, it's somewhere in the 1 to 3 year range, but it's very typical. It could vary quite a bit, and we've seen it vary immensely. Once you start your residency process, you're now in what we always call limbo. I'm sure there's an official status for it, but your limits on how long you can be a tourist essentially evaporate once you've filed for residency, and you are able to then continue the tourist forever process until such time as you are either granted residency or asked to leave the country. Extremely rare that you don't get residency. Normally it's just because you're a wanted international criminal or something of that nature. Otherwise, they will try to find a way to make you able to stay. As long as you're being a good resident or a good tourist here, they want you to stay. They just want to be sure that you are being good and that you are likely to be good in the future. That's about it. And so there's some paperwork processes. They want to make sure that you have the financial resources to continue into the future. Without becoming a burden on society, because Nicaragua simply does not have the financial resources to take care of people who do become burdens. It's just not an option for them. And so that's really all that they're looking for. That's all that they're trying to do for the most part, is just make sure of those things, that feel confident that you have been and will continue to be of value to the country. And that really isn't that hard to show under most circumstances. The one thing that could be difficult for some people is the income requirements for retirement, or being old enough to qualify for retirement, but many more people qualify for that than you think. I believe that the age for that is only 45, which, as someone who's over 45, boy, that seems easy, but if you're not over 45, that could be pretty hard. However, like I've said in other videos, if the requirement is to be 45 and you're moving as a tourist at, say, 42, well, typically you won't be able to file all that paperwork until you're 45. So that lowers the age by several years compared to the time that you're looking at moving. So all of those things, it becomes not that hard to deal with. Now, if you're 30 and you're looking to move and you wanted to use a retirement process, you may have some challenges. But I say this to everyone: don't look at those things as a permanent barrier. Don't look at them as an impossibility. Get a good lawyer. Talk to the government, do the tourist thing as long as you can, have your resources in place, and let your advocate go to the government and say, look, this person's great. They've been here for this amount of time. They want to stay here for forever. Their income's not super high, but it's decent. Maybe it is super high, in which case you've got other ways to solve the problem. But they're just not old enough. That you're just not old enough is a very reasonable argument to be able to make. Oh, look, I know they're 30, but they want to retire. What can we do? Right. And like I said in other things, the rules here for these things are not hard and fast rules. They are guidelines that they want a person that is this or better. And it gives an idea of what they want to work with. Right. So you look at that and say, in the US, we would generally look at these things and say, are they 45? Yes or no? Do they make the minimum required income, which we believe is $1,000 a month? Yes or no? Does it come from, as stated, a pension? Yes or no? Any no's, and you don't get to stay. All yeses, and maybe you get to stay, right? That's the process we're used to in the United States. Here, it's very different. They look at them as a whole. Here's what a person looks like as a whole. Is this person, who's not old enough, good enough that they're better than the picture we're given as a guideline? Yes or no? And that's a very different way of looking at the same information and treating it in a more flexible, more practical way. And I had a short that I made just the other day. This is a very much an aside, but I'm going to jump in with this. Something that you notice a lot. First of all, moving from the United States to a place like Nicaragua, you realize very quickly why so many people think of the United States as an authoritarian regime. And living in the United States, you often don't think of it because there's so much money put into marketing the U.S. as being free, and it's hard to believe it isn't. But that's why there's so much propaganda and statements. That's why freedom, liberty is said so often. You wouldn't need to say it so often if you were actually free. They're not trying to revel in the fact that they're free. They're trying to convince you that you're free. And it works pretty well. It's easier to convince someone that they're free than to make them free. So that's the path that you go. But living in the United States, growing up there, you don't really notice these things. You think, well, no, it must be the land of freedom. There's just other problems, right? Like they don't have bidets. That's crap. Pun intended. But if you actually move to a place like Nicaragua, some things really hit you quickly that the United States uses hard and fast rules everywhere in society and tries to control every aspect of life. And one that really stood out to me recently was, I know that in the United States, right, let's say you're out for a hike. Like I like to go walking in the country, really long distances. Well, sometimes you're going through the countryside and there's no available bathrooms. It just is what it is. Like this is just a fact of life. In the United States, so there are some things that are great about the United States, and public bathrooms that are free and broadly accessible is one of the best things about the US, where the US easily leads the world. Not like towards the top. It could be number one easily, right? So that's a real thing. But in what you do if you can't find a bathroom, if you're walking through fields in the country, it doesn't matter how many publicly accessible bathrooms and how free they are that you have in the United States. They're not in the middle of fields miles from nowhere, so you're stuck. If you go into a field and relieve yourself, generally you're not going to get caught, and very rarely are you going to get into trouble. But if there's a passing police car or someone happens to find out that you did that, well, you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk of going to jail, and in some extreme circumstances, being charged as a sex offender and being put on a registry that will destroy the rest of your life, all because you couldn't make it to a public bathroom. It's not even that you didn't want to, it's that you may not have been able to. That's a really bizarre situation for something that is simply a physical requirement of the human experience. And the excuse is, well, not everyone gets caught. We don't prosecute it that often, whatever. But the law's on the books and people do get prosecuted for it. And it is every time you do something like that, you live in fear that you're going to get caught. Every little thing is illegal, including going to the bathroom when nature demands. Here in Nicaragua, it is so different that I was in a situation not too long ago where I was at a police station and their bathroom in the police station was inoperable. The quick story is they have a really terrible bathroom and someone went in, used it, and it required a key to get in and a key to get out. And the person left the key in the door on the inside, closed it on the way out, and it locked with the key on the inside, and no one had a second key. So they were locked out of their own bathroom and they didn't want to kick down the door. They were waiting for another key to show up. And it was just a simple situation of waiting there for some paperwork to get done. And like, is there something we can do so I don't have to hop in a car and drive to a gas station, which was totally doable in that situation. And some people I was with did just that. Like, oh, we're just gonna drive to the Uno around the corner. Okay, that's fine. But as I didn't want to drive anywhere, and they're like, yeah, the police station has a courtyard, literally a courtyard in the gas station or in the police station. And they're like, all the cops are just going over to this corner and it's kind of out of the way. And there's some bushes. There's a little bit of privacy, not very much. And it wasn't like, we have to do this. Don't tell anyone. It was like, there's grass. The bathroom's not available. What kind of question is this? Like, of course you have to be able to go to the bathroom, and of course you can do whatever is sensible to do so. The idea that you would get in trouble for having to go to the bathroom is unthinkable in most of the world, yet in the United States could be a minor fine in many cases, but you always take the risk of a life-destroying penalty for that. That one thing, I think, explains the differences between how I feel about the U.S. and how I feel about Nicaragua in such a succinct way that just being alive in America is a terrifying experience. You're afraid at every moment that something you have no control over or very little control over or know nothing about could be a life-destroying situation. And in Nicaragua, we never feel that way. You never feel like the police are out to find some way to arrest you or have thousands of laws on the books and that any moment they could just learn about one and choose to enforce it that day at random, that a judge could make up a law after you've been arrested so that they can keep you for forever because they didn't like the way you looked or whatever. Those things don't exist. And like talking to people here, trying to explain how the law works in the United States, it is so crazy. People don't believe you, right? You know you have a problem when you can't get people to explain or to believe when you explain what seems like just how things work in the United States. Like Americans often go places and are like, wait, like the law actually is the law? Like the police just follow the written law and the judges follow the written law? It's not opinion. It's not changing based on, and this is the new thing that this has always been true, but we're now hearing it from the United States, and it's so prevalent that people are just accepting it, right? The idea, the theory behind a judge in a legal case is that they should read the law, figure out two things. Did the person in fact break the law as stated, and what is the penalty for that, right? That should be what a judge does, and that is what judges do the world over. But in the United States, the real decision is often, do we want to incarcerate them, and then what will we charge them for? And it doesn't have to be an existing law. The judge can simply make up anything that they want to charge them for on the spot if they feel like it, or they can pick and choose from existing laws to enforce or not enforce. And we hear this all the time well, this is a right-leaning judge or a left-leaning judge, and we know that they will not, and we use fake terms. Well, they will interpret the law through their desired lens, not through what they think the intent was, not what they believe the law says. No, we're expecting them to look at a written law, disregard it, and I'm not taking sides here, right? This is not the right's doing it and the left isn't. Both sides. We're expecting to take any given law, say, does this align with my personal values? Nothing to do with the actual law, nothing to do with society, nothing to do with the voters. Simply saying, do I personally believe this law is something I should uphold or not? And then interpreting is the term we use for totally disregarding the law and doing what I want anyway. And we actually elect judges based on our desire of how we want them to make up the new laws they go. The entire process of making the official laws is just to kind of placate the public to make them think they have some say in the matter. Nobody would understand that outside the United States, but when I say that to an American, they're like, well, yeah, of course, that's how it works, right? The laws are just suggestions for the judges to work from. The judges can do anything they want, right? And that is the recent cases. They've upheld that all the way to the Supreme Court. Yes, judges can do anything they want. There's no authority over them, including the written law. The people, they do not answer to the people. They do not answer to the lawmakers. It's not how it works. These are things that Americans don't like to talk about, but they all know are true. We're all used to it. We see it in the news every day. Other countries just can't believe that that is true. They literally don't believe it. That's so insane. Nicaraguans would never believe that it could work that way. But Americans, when they come here, are also similarly in total disbelief that the written law is the written law, and that the lawmakers also choose the penalties. Oh, you shot someone while robbing a mini mart, and you had a gun, and it was an armed robbery, and you were just stealing things. Ah, if found guilty, this is the penalty. And there may be some small variation, right? Did you do it while drunk? Did you do it while sober? Did you plan it ahead of time? Did you take advantage of the situation? Sure, there may be some, complexities to it, but the sentencing is predefined. It is not up for the judge to be like, I don't know, 2 years, I don't know, life. Like, the variation in the United States is absurd, right? It could be a slap on the wrist to life in prison, all for the same charge. And those variations, of course, lead to what we either know in many cases is that gender or age or race are the primary factors in sentencing rather than the crime, or they lead to people looking at things through those lenses and believing that's happening, whether it's happening or not. It doesn't matter if you have wonderful judges who never would take that into consideration and never do, right? Because regardless of what the judge does, the populace will never believe that they didn't, because it's way too easy. It's completely available to them as a form of corruption. And so no one's ever going to believe that it hasn't been used. That leads to just as many problems, almost, as actually committing that atrocity. But we can't say it's a crime because a judge can't commit a crime. Whatever they do is, by definition, what they're allowed to do. I really like having the freedom to walk around and move around in my videos, and using the Rode wireless mics. It makes that really possible. So I'm holding it today. I hope this sounds good. I want to get one of those microphone sticks like an interviewer has. They're really cheap. They just hold this mic with a plastic stick, right? But it would be cool, right? There'd be times it'd be neat to have. Anyway, so the next part of the question is healthcare here, and are there any inherent problems with traveling with a child? And the answer, I think, is no. I mean, first of all, this is an area that has very good healthcare in general. Not fantastic. It's not Colombia. It's not Mexico, but it's pretty good. And some things about here are certainly better than Mexico. You get much more guaranteed access to public health care. We don't have the insurance things here like Mexico does. Mexico actually has some major healthcare problems, but it also has some great healthcare opportunities. So it's more of a hot and cold thing, and here it's more of an even warm. But Colombia really stands out as the leader in the region, and El Salvador probably a bit better than here. Guatemala maybe very competitive with us. Costa Rica probably better, but we have some leading hospitals here, so no problem there. So depending on where you are in the country, this could be a little bit of a factor, right? Be aware that small rural areas are going to struggle with healthcare more than the major cities. Now, when it comes to healthcare, location is going to play a really major role in what's available to you. So that's something you need to be aware of while you're coming to Nicaragua. Now, also keep in mind, the country's not that large physically. So if you are avoiding going to, say, the Caribbean coast, where you have a lot of distance between you and a major city, you're probably going to be within easy reach of a major hospital at any given time. Most of the best hospitals in the country are in Managua, and it's relatively centrally located. So just keep in mind that you're probably going to want to find a way, or to be able to find a way to get to Managua should anything go wrong in a healthcare crisis. If you want to be able to give birth at home, that should not be any problem. All kinds of things happen at home, including regular healthcare. If you want a doctor, a nurse, a team of medical professionals to come to your home, not just for childbirth, but for normal everyday ailments or concerns, those are options. Veterinary care works that way as well. We will often have the vet come to our house. Sometimes it's because we have a pet parrot, and transporting it can be a major problem, so they understand. But also, if our dogs are sick or something, they will certainly come to the house. Sometimes we send them out to the beach if someone's had an accident or something. So with all kinds of care, the idea that you could have a home visit is completely normal. So giving birth at home would not be strange either. This is not the United States, so the idea that healthcare is going to be tightly controlled and you have no say in what you're going to do, those things are very different here. You have a lot of flexibility when it comes to your own health. So yes, home birth should be no problem. I've never heard of someone doing that here, but I don't know a lot of people giving birth here. A lot of people do, so that's normal. and a lot of people struggle to get to healthcare just because they don't know what their options are. They don't have a lot of flexibility in planning. They have to work a lot. They don't have resources for having a car, transportation, or possibly communications. So a lot of scenarios have to be addressed from a medical care perspective. So importantly, some cities are going to have much better healthcare and transportation than others. Here in Leon, for example, right now, our central hospital is not very good. I've not heard specific complaints about it, but realistically, it's not a very good hospital. But we do have an excellent private hospital here. If you're planning on giving birth or very likely to give birth here in Leon, as an example, I would recommend already having a relationship with the Amaxa Hospital to be ready. That's the private one, regardless of if you plan to use the hospital actually for the birth, or if you're planning to simply have them as a backup and you want to do a birth at home. You certainly want to have a doctor that you could reach out to. If you're going to be looking to use public facilities, then Leon is probably a pretty bad choice right now. It's one of the reasons why we have a major public work underway to build one of the largest hospitals in the region. Rumors say it's actually the largest, but we'll wait and see, is because our existing one is so small and old and run down. The new one is going to be enormous and beautiful. Once that's completed, Leon may be the perfect place to have a child born. But for now, it's not the best. But someplace like Wee Willie, way up in the north, Hinotega in that region, has a new hospital way out in the middle of what feels like nowhere. And if you were going to have to give birth up there, maybe just fine. You wouldn't need to travel anywhere because they just put that hospital in. They have great facilities. So it's going to vary a lot by where you are as far as in the cycle of having new facilities built, or if you're in an area where the good private hospitals exist, like here in Leon or up in Chinandega, we have the Amaxa facilities, and there's many private facilities around the country. That's always an option, and if you wanted to check with one of those systems, Amaxa could serve you in multiple cities. If you had a relationship, they'd be ready for you. And Vivian Pellis, which is the hospital system out of Managua, similarly has clinics around the country. You may be able to participate in a group, and so a little bit of planning for what you want to do could go a long way. That's the hospital consideration. The other consideration is transport. If you're in a place like Hinotega, Nueva Segovia, you could be up in the mountains and very far away by road from the capital. Should something go incredibly wrong, heaven forbid, you may need to take an ambulance ride or a private car into Managua. And that could, in some of those cases, be many hours away. The ambulance, even though it can pass people and send sirens and people will get out of the way, is still a victim to roadblocks and construction and simply the mountains. They are not going to be able to shave very much time off of that trip. And so you may be many hours away from Managua in those cases. So that's something to be aware of. Here in Leon, while our hospital may not be the best, but we certainly have facilities. If we need to get to Managua, we can be at the hospital in under 90 minutes, and that's on the public bus. If you had to go in an ambulance, you expect it to be as low as 80 minutes. And I've been picked up at home, not for my own issue, by an ambulance within 10 minutes, right? Which is very much what you would expect in the United States. The U.S. has a very good ambulance response time. Just in general, it's something that they're very good at. It's also very expensive. Here, those ambulances are very inexpensive, and maybe 10 minutes would be long. The U.S. may respond in 7 minutes, 6 minutes, right? They're so good at being there instantly. But with just a few more minutes, you're going to have an ambulance here, and that ambulance could get you to Managua pretty darn quickly. And of course, they can call ahead and have the facility ready for you. There's emergency rooms and all that. That said, we have an emergency room right here, not just in Leon, but in Sutiava, right, which is the barrio that I live in. I have no idea how good it is. I'm sure not very is the answer. We've never looked at it and said, I hope I get to use that facility, right? Not like that at all, but it does exist. And in case of an acute emergency, that is where you would go first. And I'm sure, they're going to be able to take care of an awful lot of things. Their only job really is to triage you and make sure you're okay to get you to a more larger regional hospital. Also keep in mind, in case of extreme issues, Nicaragua is a very small country. It's like being in a single city. And I say this a lot, but it's important to always keep in mind when you're looking at healthcare concerns such as this. If you were to be in a really extreme situation and you had some complication that a city or a country the size of Nicaragua just is not prepared to handle, the obvious choices from here are you could be repatriated to the United States quite quickly, but the U.S. tends to not provide the best healthcare. You may not want to go there. You would be much more likely to want to go go to either Mexico to the north or Colombia to the south. Both are very quick and reachable from here and have excellent healthcare systems that would be perfect for really extreme situations. I would choose those over the United States in essentially all circumstances. So all those things, I think you should, because, not because it's Nicaragua, but because you're not from Nicaragua, because you aren't familiar with all the mechanisms and things. If something happens, you're going to be at, first of all, you're going to be very busy giving birth or whatever, right? That's not a time to be making split-second decisions. So do a little bit of planning around what you would want to do in different scenarios. Look up where you're going to be, which facilities make sense in those locations, what is your travel time or travel options to get back to the major hospitals at Managua, also the airport at Managua, just in case. Is it better if you were right on the northern border and something happened, would you go into Honduras because they could get you to Tegucigalpa pretty quickly? Or if you're on the southern border, would you go to Liberia or onto San Jose because major hospitals not that far away? There are options. So with a little bit of planning, would you travel? Do you want to do it at home? Do you have someone on call? Maybe find an advocate who's here and can deal with those scenarios. You say, okay, here's what's going on. Here's where I am, and they can answer those things for you at that time in the moment. Maybe very important. They can call ahead to a hospital, make arrangements, make sure someone's available, whatever. Just because you don't know all the options, and so under an emergency situation, you don't want to be having to think about those things. You want it to be automatic and simple and handled. So that's really what I would think is the biggest concern. Additionally, the question was asked, what about health insurance? So in Nicaragua, health insurance is not required, whether you're a tourist or a resident. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. As a resident, it is required, but it's part of your residency process. So you don't need additional health insurance, and it doesn't necessarily have to meet your needs as you would normally state them. It is simply a minimum level that is required to make sure that, again, like many things, that you don't become a burden on the country. If you're looking at the question on health insurance is a difficult one. Of course, if you save up money, you can easily pay for just about any medical procedure you can imagine. And when it's your own money, you have complete flexibility to spend nothing if nothing goes wrong, order tests that other people may say are unnecessary. And you're like, I want these tests anyway. What are they going to say? It's your money. Of course, they'll sell you a test. And if you want to switch to another country, you can go wherever you want. There's no restrictions when it's your own money. Make sure that money is easily accessible and that you can get it at a moment's notice. But other than that, that can be a really amazing choice. That said, if I was traveling and pregnant, which is quite an extreme scenario, I think I would personally get the insurance. I would look for international travelers insurance that gives me a couple of options. One being repatriation to the United States, and another being that you can take to whatever country you're going to go to. That if you're in Nicaragua and have a problem and want to go to Colombia, that is covered. Those getting temporary on that will be a little bit expensive, but I think it's both a peace of mind and this is your baby being born, right? This is not an adult traveling and knowing what risks they're taking and being able to evaluate and having to take these risks every day. This is an extremely acute moment of your life where you're at a very much increased health risk. And while that health risk increase is pretty minor, it does exist, and it doesn't just affect you, it affects the baby, and you have a family that you have to maneuver. There's a lot of moving parts potentially in this particular moment. Under normal circumstances, I don't recommend healthcare in these scenarios, but with pregnant and traveling, it easily is going to be an additional peace of mind. I realize that money comes out of your pool to have saved up as cash for health issues, but the insurance is going to help you with a whole bunch of stuff and won't be that expensive. So at least price it out and consider that it may be worth having a little bit of extra peace of mind, and in a way you'd be buying an advocate, right? Because your health insurance should help you with some of the process should something happen. I have to go to a hospital. Where do I go? Look, you're going to Vivian Pellis. That's what's covered. So just go, right, to the best hospital. Don't ask questions. Go. If you're paying with your own money, you might be like, but is Militar cheaper? It's good enough, right? Yeah, it probably is good enough. It's a really good hospital, and it is cheaper. But if it's your insurance and they're going to pay for the best, just go to the best, right? So things like that, it's a moment in your life. Having children of my own, I would certainly feel better traveling in that circumstance with insurance. Now that my kids are older, we don't travel with insurance. We don't worry about it. We can pay for any procedure out of pocket, like whatever. And we move around so much that it makes sense when traveling or whatever. And living here, we don't have to worry about insurance. So that is my recommendation on that. Good luck with your trip. Ask more questions. That is great, for sure. While I was recording this, I had to stop because the camera overheated, of course, because it always does. Two little things came in, so I'm going to tack those on now. So blessed, and I don't know the number because I don't have the phone in front of me, asked about coming in from Honduras to Nicaragua. And I already answered this in shorts, but a lot of you in the camera do not view my shorts. You only see these. The audiences are very different. So the question is, they didn't get stamped coming into Nicaragua, but they came from by land from Guatemala to El Salvador to Honduras and into Nicaragua, which is a very common path to do and a great way to travel through the region. That group of 4 countries is known as the CA4, or the Central American Four. They are the last 4 standing of the Central American Republic, and while they're independent states, they have decided to have very heavy cooperation between them. They have a lot of cultural affinity between each other, especially the northern 3, but Nicaragua participates really well, and they have a shared border zone. This is not quite like the EU, where you move completely transparently between the different members, but it is a lot like the Schengen in Europe, that there's an outside border and everything else is an inside border, or soft border as we call it. So in this case, So Blessed entered at Guatemala, entering the hard border between Mexico and Guatemala, or maybe they flew into Guatemala and then the hard border from wherever they flew in from, America probably, because they mentioned a U.S. passport. As they moved through the CA4, each of those countries may or may not at any given border decide to stamp their passport. They're allowed to. They often do, but they're not required to. It's a little bit confusing. But those are soft stamps. They are not visas. They're just kind of recognizing that you're moving between the countries, so it's a little bit easier to track your movements. When going into any given one, they can opt simply not to stamp you, so don't be surprised if you don't get a stamped passport, because your hard stamp was when you entered Guatemala. So that's normal. They made it into Nicaragua and didn't get a stamp. That's what brought up the question. They also asked, do they still get 90 days? So the answer is yes, the same as you always do when you enter Nicaragua or Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, you get 90 days in the CA4, not in the individual countries. So this is very important. What you got is 90 days in the group. So from the time you entered Guatemala until you leave Nicaragua, 90 days total, not 90 days per country. There's no resets. If you want to reset that, you need to cross into either Costa Rica to the south, Mexico to the north, or Belize to the northeast, or fly somewhere else, Panama, US, whatever. And then you'll immediately get a reset and you can re-enter any of those countries. So it's very easy to deal with, but a lot of people struggle with understanding that the CA4 essentially operates as a single country. It definitely operates as a single border, and the interior is more like states, and you're moving between states, but they're still borders. So you still cross between them, but it's not entirely unlike in the US traveling between mainland to Hawaii or to Puerto Rico. Technically, you don't need a passport to move between them. You're not supposed to get your passport stamped in between them. You're not supposed to have any border controls, but in the real world, they often recommend that you carry a passport, because just because you're inside the border and not leaving and not supposed to have anything go wrong, sometimes things do. So it's a little bit more like that. It's more extreme than that, but it's in that kind of category. So just be aware that that is how things work. You have a total of 90 days, not 4 times 90 days. Also, I wanted to talk about the Insta360 link just real quick, because I'm into cameras, and it came up because on this channel I've talked a little bit about how I was planning on buying the DJI Pocket 3. It's a specific vlogger camera with a built-in gimbal, fits in your pocket. Like, it's really easy to carry around. The Pocket 1 and 2 looked fantastic. I was really interested in trying them, but they're quite old now. I was waiting for the 3 to come out. They were talking about it all year. It really seemed like it was just about to come out, and when it didn't, I used that budget to buy the GoPro 12 that we're on, and I'm very happy with that, and that's great, but I'm still wishing I had that kind of vlogging camera. I think it'd be really handy for a lot of things I do, especially travel. And it just seems like they keep having a rumor that it's coming and nothing actually comes. It feels like DJI has given up on that platform, and it kind of makes sense why they would. They have a lot of money tied up in other things, and this is a product that people don't actually buy that often, even though it's a fantastic piece of equipment. I don't know any vloggers using it. I would love to use it. I would use it constantly. You would love the footage I get from it, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. Interestingly, a bit of technology has come out from Insta360, not super recently, but relatively recently, called the Link, and it's just a webcam for your desktop, but it is essentially the top piece of the DJI Pocket. It's completely Insta360 technology. I'm not saying they took anything from them. I'm just saying that it's this very similar camera, and they're operating it from a computer. But that means all they have to do is add the remote control stick, basically, and you have the Pocket replacement. And so I'm wondering, and I'm hypothesizing, and I'm predicting, and I'm hoping that Insta360 is heading down this path, because I love Insta360. I love everything that they do. Their work is fantastic. I love their cameras. I love how I work with their cameras. Like, using them is great. And I would absolutely prefer if it was Insta360 making a pocket vlogging camera rather than DJI. Not that I don't like DJI, they make great stuff too, and they own Hasselblad, for those who know. But I prefer to stick with GoPro and Insta360. That's really where I'm invested in these kinds of cameras, and that would be fantastic if it was just part of my suite of tools. I'd also be happy if GoPro made one, but there doesn't seem to be anything like that in the works, and probably would never be. But GoPro's very, at this point, focused. They figured out they had to really buckle down, in the same way that Insta360 picked up where GoPro left the 360 cams on the table. I'm hoping that this is the beginning of them picking up where DJI left the vlogging camera on the table. And it's interesting that in the same vein, a couple of Chinese makers who make much cheaper, not as high-end models as DJI. So Insta360 would probably make a better camera than DJI. A couple of these makers who make cheaper ones have actually taken the pocket format and made them with a detachable head, which gives you a lot of really cool flexibility. And it looks like maybe what Insta360 has done is made that detachable head, but haven't made the rest of the camera yet. And because of that, they were able to start with making a webcam. All they have to do, I think, is add the battery portion and some controls and stuff to their existing link. I think they actually have a dual purpose device. They don't have to re-engineer the camera at all. They may already have what we need. That would be absolutely amazing. So that's my prediction, that is where the new vlogging camera is going to come from. And if it does, I'm getting one. Insta360 has made such good stuff with the Go 3 and the X3. I'm so happy with those. I want their version of the Pocket 3 vlogging camera, the Vlog 3. That's what I want. Insta360, you're hearing my wishes right here. And everyone, I'm telling you, that is the future of these cameras. I see it happening. It makes sense. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. As always, if you'd like to help support the channel, which is very much appreciated, buymeacoffee.com/Scott L. Miller. That comes directly to me, helps make all of this possible. Get down, ask your questions. I love being able to answer the things that you guys ask, because it gives me something to talk about, and I like that it's directly helpful. It's not just me hypothesizing. This is something you actually need to know, so I like being able to do that. And but it really does help me. It makes my life so much easier that I can come out and answer these questions. Let me know about this format. Just trying some things out with the camera, because I was trying to get things done today. And share with family, friends, post on social media, get the word out there, help us find just a few more subscribers. Every little bit goes so far. And if you want to support the channel in a non-financial way, let your browser play a few extra videos of mine during the day. Put on some of the concerts or something. That helps a lot. Check out my other channels like Nicaragua 360, Drive Warp, Take Flight with Scott. I have a lot of videos out there of kind of related content. Some Nicaragua, some travel, some just music and stuff. Go watch some of that, put it on a TV, let it play while you're cleaning the house, doing your work, whatever. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. I'll see all of you tomorrow.